Okay, hello everybody. We're back again. We did a short version of this video for people who just wanted to get the bottom line as quickly as possible. So we did that version. Now we're going to kind of back up and do a little bit slower version and a little bit more detailed version of this talk. And we have a few slides that we didn't include on the first one. But as we said in the first video, the elderberry is a quite common wild plant. It's really a large shrub or small tree, depending on how you grow it. It can be as high as 20 to 30 feet high and spread out 12 to 15 feet or more, and be just covered with white flowers in the spring and have all of these clusters of berries later in the summer. There's a number of different species. Sambucus nigra is the one that most of the studies have been looking at by far, although there's studies on the other ones as well. Sambucus canadensis is a North American native one, Northeast American anyway. And it may be a subspecies of the Sambucus nigra, according to some people, but I'm not sure. Sambucus williamsi is fairly common. It's also sold as a plant to have medicinal purposes. It's from Northeast Asia. Sambucus formosana, some of the research that we have is on that one. So these are all similar. They all look similar. Sambucus nigra does have the most research. However, many species have been studied. When they compare the compounds, they're pretty similar between the different species of blue and black elderberry. Now, there are some that are more red elderberries and even a few that are almost white. Those probably are not the ones that you want if you're wanting medicinal properties, because the bioactive compounds are different in them. When the bioactive compounds in elderberry, some of the very important ones appear to be anthocyanins, which will give a deep red, purple to black color to a berry. And so when you see berries with that, you know they have a lot of those anthocyanins in them. So there's not a lot of difference between the species, apparently. Now, I kind of like the idea we're going to be making capsules soon out of elderberry and have it available. I'm going to try to get at least 2 species of elderberry in that, because there may be a little bit of variation between species, and so that kind of gives me a little bit of assurance that I'm getting everything that elderberry has to offer if I do it that way. But it's not necessary to do that really, probably. But something I just kind of thought I'd like to do. We now have elderberry extract, liquid extract syrups available from a local producer here in North Carolina. They do a very good job, and it's available to buy from us right now. It's on our website, I think. It's going to be on Amazon soon, we think, trying to. And it's the Darby Farms elderberry syrup. And it's something that's really great. You may want to try that. It's great for cold, flu. Of course, people are asking about the latest virus. We're right here in the middle of the coronavirus outbreak right now, and we don't know where that's going, whether or not it's something that we need to worry about. But it's certainly something a lot of people are worrying about. We do not know yet on this particular thing what cures it and what doesn't. There's just not enough research out there. However, elderberries we're going to be talking about seems to have pretty general antiviral effects, and it comes from a like I said, a tree or bush, and there's a picture of the tree or bush over there. I will caution you, this is a nice plant to grow. It really is. And if you wanted to make a big hedge behind your house to kind of block the view, it would serve that purpose very well. It would also give you berries that you can pick in the late summer or fall, I believe. And, you know, it's really, I recommend it. But be careful with the berries. In fact, with anything that you eat from the whole plant, because it's toxic as it comes right off the plant. The raw berries are toxic, apparently, particularly the seeds in them. The flowers are toxic. The stems and leaves are toxic. So you don't want to do this in a haphazard manner. If you cook it down, the juice from the berries, that's the best way to do it. That takes care of the toxins. You can use it to make juice, wine, jam, medicinal syrups, liquid extracts, whatever you want. And it's safe, but you just have to treat it correctly. You don't want to mess up on that one, because it'll make you quite ill. It's rarely toxic, but you know, it has that potential. And it can be grown probably almost anywhere that any of you live. It's all over North America. It's quite common in Europe. It's quite common in Asia, the different species are. So it's something that I would suggest that you try growing. But how about viruses? Like I said, right now we're really in the middle of this coronavirus thing. And nobody knows quite sure how it's transmitted or what to do about it. And so we're trying to do a lot of different things. We do know that it's mostly comes from people. Viruses are always transmitted between, you know, animals and people and people. That kind of thing. Most of the animal viruses don't bother people. Most of the human viruses don't bother animals, but there are some crossovers in it. And that's being suspected in the latest coronavirus. Now, it's important to realize viruses are not alive. So, you know, viruses can't get into a bottle of water and sit there and grow and multiply. They just can't, they don't have the ability to multiply. They are just more like a chemical in a way than they are like a living creature. But they can transmit RNA and DNA into cells, which the cells then are tricked into replicating and making more viruses. So they can grow inside of you and I and then be transmitted to other people who do the same thing and keep spreading it. We prevent viral infections by not inhaling or ingesting them usually. Hand washing, not getting close to infected people is really important. Wearing masks and cleaning surfaces that you might touch is essential. You know, eating extra spices like onion and garlic and ginger appears to be helpful for both viral and bacterial infections. But what if these fail? Well, one thing I suggest not doing for the virus is to use colloidal silver to treat it, because it's pretty much ineffective against viruses from the research that I've seen. Now, it is a good antibacterial and it works. So if you do get the infection, sometimes people get secondary bacterial infections in the lungs and places. And gargling with silver might be beneficial to get some of those bacteria in your throat. So I can't say that you shouldn't do that, but to think that silver is going to protect you from getting the flu or the cold or whatever, it probably won't do that, to be honest. But what do we do? Well, the elderberry really comes into play in this one, and some of the other plants do as well. But the elderberry seems to be the star of the show when it comes to these flu viruses and things like that. The silymarin is another one that does, and I put it up there. That's from milk thistle. But the second paper there talks about elderberry, how it can help prevent um, influenza virus, and it gives the mechanism of it. What it talks about are, if you look at the title there, interfering with lipid raft association. We'll look at this a little bit more in a minute, but what they're calling rafts are little sections on the surface of the cells in the lungs that are lipids that a virus can attach to, and they kind of attach to that and are able to enter the cell. And this is showing that the elderberry actually prevents the formation of that, or the binding to it, really. Also, the second one just sort of gives shows that it can prevent the proliferating and spreading of the flu viruses in the lungs by elderberry. The fourth paper showed antiviral properties against feline immunodeficiency. They compared it with two other herbs, and the other two had got up to toxic doses if they did it enough to prevent the flu, but the elderberry did not. So all of the elderberries in these studies were the Sambucus nigra. That's been a pretty consistent theme. Now, there are also human studies. These studies showed that the elderberry, 2 to 3 300 milligram capsules per day, standardized at 20% polyphenols, could shorten the cold duration for about 2 days. In the second study, type A and B influenza was cured in 2 to 3 days by the treated group, 6 days in the untreated group. The second study, about the same results in the same group. They found that giving 15 milliliters of elderberry syrup or placebo syrup 4 times a day in people who already had the flu reduced its duration of symptoms by about 2 days. So it's pretty effective, actually, in actually treating it. Finally, the fourth one there, flu patients given 4 doses with 175 milligrams of Sambucus nigra extract, and this was in a lozenge. After 48 hours, almost all of the 32 patients given it were pretty much symptom-free, compared to only 5 being symptom-free in the 32 patients given the placebo. So these were interesting studies, interesting results. However, the human research does look promising, but a little bit of precautions there. They were mostly funded by companies selling elderberry products. So you're always a little bit cautious when you see that in these studies, because the researchers sometimes want to give the people funding it what they want because they'd like to get more funding. You know, that's not ethical, and it's not always done. In fact, I know a lot of researchers that will refuse to do a study if they are being pressured to get certain results. And that's the way it should be, but it's not always the case. However, there is also animal research with these same viruses that show it works in animals, and those studies were not supported by companies selling elderberry. There was also a lot of mechanistic studies, mostly in cell studies, where they're really looking at how the elderberry interferes with the binding to the cell, the virus proliferation in a cell, things like that, for a mechanism of how it works. And those studies have turned out pretty good. So all the evidence combined provides pretty convincing evidence that's likely to be beneficial for combating viral infections and for preventing them in the first place. So I feel pretty good about elderberry personally for colds and flu. I can't say for the coronavirus that's going around right now, the COVID-19. It's just, you know, there haven't been studies on it yet. It's too new. So I'm not going to tell you that it'll work for that. However, it does seem to be a pretty general antiviral effect. Now, if we look at how the immune system responds to it, anytime you have a virus or a bacterial in the body that's not supposed to be there, the immune system is going to get cranked up and start working against it. The first phase is to make antibodies to it. And if you look up in the top left-hand corner, that kind of pinkish cell there is deteriorating. And you see little blue things all over it. Those are antibodies. And then they really bind to it, and they end up causing it to be identified by macrophages usually and gobbled up and destroyed. So that one's not going to bother you. The problem with the antibody response is it takes about 5 days to get that really going in the body. So that's a lot of time to be, exposed without having the antibodies to it. So, that gives you a residual effect. That's kind of how the vaccines work. They cause you to have an immune response to a virus. They usually give a killed viruses for a vaccine, and then you make antibodies to it. And if you're lucky, those antibodies stay around for a long time, and the next time you see it, you have an immediate response to it, and you don't get sick. Well, the viruses that don't get there, they have another way of dealing with it later, but we'll talk about that in a minute. They see where it says sialic acid up there on the lung cell. Sialic acid, we talked about those lipid rafts a while ago that the virus binds to. Well, it's the sialic acid in those lipid rafts that the virus actually binds to. So what happens is the virus comes over here, binds to that sialic acid, goes into the cell, and what happens then? Well, you get more cells made by the lung cell, more viruses. So suddenly that lung cell is just full of viruses. And that's not, obviously what you want to happen. Now, where the elderberry is, it actually binds to that sialic acid. So you saw that sort of, the virus comes in there, hits and doesn't stick and goes away, because the elderberry is, some of the compounds, the cyanidins in there, are actually binding to sialic acid. It's not available to the virus, so the virus can't bind to the cell. That's one of the main ways that elderberry does its job and works. By binding that sialic acid. Also, there's something called neuraminidase. That sialic acid goes with it into the cell, and the neuraminidase cleaves it off and makes the virus then, the new viruses, able to go out. And so what happens is the viruses contact the neuraminidase, and they're ready to be exported from the cell. So they go to the next adjoining lung cell and infect it, and it just spreads through the lungs. Well, elderberry also blocks that neuraminidase in a few studies. So that's a second place it works. So we see that we have at least 2 places that elderberry compounds can work to block a virus in the lungs. And they're not highly specific to just one type of virus, because these are mechanisms, the sialic acid binding and the neuraminidase, that are used by lots of different kind of viruses, and not just the flu virus or the rhinovirus or the coronavirus or whatever, but many of them use that same mechanism for getting into cells, infecting them, and being exported. So how about the coronavirus, COVID-19? We'll just talk about it a little bit. We don't have a lot of information at all on the COVID-19 virus, but there is some on other coronaviruses. And we've been dealing with coronaviruses a long time, actually. That's not, the coronavirus is a new term for a lot of people, but it's not new really, because a lot of the infections that you see are coronavirus, lung infections and things. A lot of the pneumonia is coronaviruses. So they've been around for a while. This new one is just spread more easily and may, and I say may, have a higher fatality rate than some of the others. So one study looked at Sambucus formosana, that guy, stem extract against coronavirus NL63. The extract and caffeic acid from the extract both inhibit the attachment of the virus to cells. So that's one of the ways it does that, and probably through that sialic acid that we were talking about. It also worked against hepatitis C virus. They compared that, which isn't even a lung-type virus. So you can see that these viruses use these same methods. Another study looked at Sambucus nigra against coronavirus, avian infectious, a coronavirus. It's avian infectious bronchitis virus, IBV, in Vero cells. Rhodiola rosava and sativa seed extracts did not have any effect on the viruses, but S. nigra extracted lowered the virus titer by up to 6-fold. And electron microscopy showed some deteriorated virus particles there. So I'm not sure exactly what was happening. It seems to have been a different mechanism in this study, perhaps. But at any rate, they were both effective against corona-type viruses. And again, I'm not trying to say it would work on COVID-19. I don't know. No one else does. But in conclusion, the elderberry extracts are probably effective against coronavirus since it seems to be a very general antiviral agent, the ingredients in there. There are a lot of different species of elderberry, but they all seem to be effective and have about the same active ingredients. Although it's probably better to stick with the black or blue elderberry since they have the higher contents of anthocyanins, and which appear to be the major effective components. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I do want to emphasize that we do have elderberry syrup available right now, and I'm really hoping very soon to have some elderberry capsule products as well. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week. Stay safe. Certainly the best thing to do in avoiding flus, viruses, colds, are just the basic things of hand washing, cleanliness, being careful not to be around people who are sneezing and coughing and spreading it. These things. Prevention is always the best way to avoid any illness like this. So, goodbye for now, and I hope you learned something today. And I enjoyed giving this presentation.